Item number 13, personal explanations. Item number 14, motions.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion standing in my name, which reads, whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial state opening of the third session of the 10th Parliament on Friday, 4th October 2019, was further deferred to a date to be fixed. Be it resolved that the said address be further deferred to a date to be fixed.
Honorable members, the question is that whereas debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial opening of the third session of the 10th Parliament on Friday, 4th October 2019, was further deferred to a date to be fixed, the said address be further deferred to a date to be fixed. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this throne speech, as it was delivered 4th October 2019, was straight into the budget. Then, Mr. Speaker, you're overtaken by COVID. We had limited time in this House, Mr. Speaker, and this is only the second of the sessions that we've had for the year. So in that context, Mr. Speaker, we're asking for the debate on the gracious address to be deferred to a further date, because it's not something that you should take lightly, the debate on the throne speech. So it will give us time, Mr. Speaker, so that we treat it with the respect that it deserves. I beg that it so be deferred, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the debate on the gracious address delivered by the Governor General on the occasion of the ceremonial opening of the third session of the 10th Parliament on Friday, 4th October 2015, and was deferred to a date to be fixed, that it now be further deferred to a date to be fixed. Those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. If the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Item number 14. Item number 15, bills.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence to reorder the bills, Mr. Speaker, and so as to bring forward the Consumer Protection Amendment Act, Mr. Speaker, as number one, and we'll revert back to the order. Thank you.
Consumer Protection
Amendment. Yeah.
Okay, so we have reorganized the order of the bills. So we take consumer protection.
Yeah, you won't be able to eat.
An act to amend the Consumer Protection Act number 2 of 2018, shortly entitled Consumer Protection Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading the bill for an act shortly entitled Consumer Protection Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the relevant standing order of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all the stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the regular standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all the stages at this sitting. Leader of Government Business, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to oppose the second reading or to the standing orders be suspended so that the bill be taken through all its stages. Mr. Speaker, I simply did that because I do believe that as we plot the course forward for democracy, over the last few years, Mr. Speaker, we have seen occasions when seldom that the bills were only taken like read through different stages at different times. Now, I could understand in terms of the carnival suspension bill that is here, that is an emergency in terms of the time limit. But when I studied democracies in our Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, it is very seldom that a bill will be taken through all its stages at one sitting. And what I would urge today, Mr. Speaker, is that we revert back to good democratic practices in Parliament, where we have time to study and debate the bills, and not just do so in one sitting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, this is an amendment to the substantive bill. It's not the Consumer Protection Bill is already passed, and this act is seeking to correct some typographical errors because the unit has been established from the 1st of July to enforce the bill, but there are some typographical errors in it and some administrative matters that this amendment to the substantive bill, if it was a substantive bill, for the first time.
Honorable Representative for St. David, you had made a motion.
Yes.
And I was about to put the motion to the House.
Okay.
So let me put the motion to the House, and the House will determine. Honorable members, the question is that the standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's the first time I'm presenting a bill with the Leader of the Opposition. And so I'll stand guided by you, Mr. Speaker. So thank you for the guidance. I noticed when you said anybody, to the contrary, the opposition leader did not vote. So that means he agreed that it's only amendments, so we could go through the amendments. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, the consumer, that is something that was lacking in our legislation in terms of governance, that we did not have a consumer protection bill, and members of the public made continuous call for the government to introduce this bill, because what happened in the past, under the Supplies Control Act and Sale of Goods Act, you have to use persuasion when you go to the business. It's moral suasion you have to use to get them to comply. Now you have an act that enforced, Act number 2 of 2018, and the unit that was under the Ministry of Finance, the Consumer Affairs Unit, is now under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperative. That's where the ministry, that's where it's located from the 1st of July, and it is this office now under the Ministry of Trade, Consumer Affairs Office, that will deal with all these matters as it relates to implementing the measures in this bill. So, Clause 2 seeks to amend Section 8.1. Section 8.1 provides that the minister shall appoint a director of consumer affairs. However, this amendment is saying that the director should be a public officer. Therefore, it takes away the power of the minister to appoint a director of consumer affairs, and instead says that a public officer should be appointed as the director of consumer affairs. That's the first amendment to this bill. Clause 3.6 to amend section 10 to remove the paragraph that the consumer advisory body shall review work plan. We think that it is the Consumer Affairs Division that should do that and not the advisory body. And that is, this clause seeks to address that issue. Clause 4 seeks to amend section 13 to provide clarity on the procedural connection between investigation and the referral of matters to the tribunal. So there will be the office, they could make complaints to, and then there will be a tribunal. If you are not satisfied, you can appeal to a tribunal. Clause 5 seeks to correct typographical error in the numbering. If you look at the bill, you'll see section 31, 30, 31, and when you come to 32, you will see 11 there. So you have to remove 11. Numbering of section 31, if you look at the bill, you will see 11 there. So this 11 is really supposed to be 31 because you have 30, then you have 11 and you have 32. That's the correction there. Yes. Clause 6 seeks to amend 33.1 to remove the requirement of payment fee for lodging of a complaint. If you look at the original act, you'll see there is a fee for the complaint. Now we're saying there will be no fee. You want to make a complaint against a business for the provision of services or goods, you only pay the fee if you want to go to the tribunal, but not for a complaint. So that is being removed by this section of paying fees for complaint. Clause 7 seeks to amend section 34.5c to correct the typographical error. Section 34.5c reads as follows, that upon receipt of a complaint, the official proceed to investigate the complaint unless the office is satisfied that the complaint was filed in accordance with section 38.4. However, section 38.4 does not exist. If you read the Principal Act, you will say under section 38.4, but there's no section 38.4, so the correction there, it should be section 36.4 instead of section 38.4. That's the correction we're making there. Clause 8 seeks to amend section 35.2 of the Principal Act to correct a typographical error. Section 35.2 reads as follows: If the opposite party fails to make a written response in accordance with section 34.9, the official complete the investigation based on the complaint and the evidence. However, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the Act, there is no 34.9. Section 34, clause 34 only have 8 sections, not 9. But the bill referring to 34.9. There is no 34.9 in section 34. So section 34.9 does not exist. Where really there is an error there, and it should be 34.8. That's the correction we're making there. Instead of saying 34.9, which does not exist, because there is no 34.9 in the bill, it should be 34.8 as the appropriate correction there. That's why this clause 6 to correct this. Clause 9 seeks to amend section 54 to correct reference to respondent in subsection 3A with reference to the defendant. So that is the correction that clause 9 is seeking to make in section 54. Clause 10 seeks to amend schedule 1 to correct reference to the tribunal in section 3 with reference to the advisory body. So clause 10, the reference in schedule 1 should be to the advisory body. Clause 11 seeks to amend schedule 2 to correct reference to subsection 14 in paragraph 5D with reference to paragraph 15, since paragraph 15 addresses the requirement to disclose a conflict of interest and will justify operation of paragraph 5. So as I indicated, Mr. Speaker, there's really some typographical errors in these amendments. There's no substantive change, but we had to make this error changes in order to bring everything in conformity with the act that was passed, Act 2 of 2018, and as indicated, the Consumer Affairs Office is now under the Ministry of Trade from the 1st of July. Officers, they are there appointed. The public now have a place that they can lodge complaint to against suppliers of goods and services. And it's not only goods, sometimes when you consumer complaint, it is dominated by defective items. So you bought a TV, and in 8 days it's not working, and you return it, and then the wholesaler or the retailer, the business person say, well, we have no agreement here, there is no guarantee, or there was no warranty, so we can't take it back. And you cannot do anything. Now, the law provides the unit, the officers there, the legal basis for taking action. And you hear that complaint all over that certain things happen and they return the item and it's not taken back on the basis that there is no warranty. This bill is something that's long overdue in Grenada. We know in the more developed countries, we hear about all sorts of insurance against goods and where you could complain. Now, formally, you have this in place, and it is designed, as the name is, to protect the consumers. And not only goods, it's services too. So if you're not satisfied with the services provided by the telecommunications company, the electricity company, and other companies, these are deal with goods and services. And that is something people have been asking for a long time. We have a lot of complaints from telecommunication providers and other providers as service providing the service. Under this bill, it gives the consumer officers the legal authority. It clearly outlines what can be done, and when they lodge the complaint to the Consumer Affairs Office, if they are not satisfied, they can go to a tribunal that is set up under the Act to listen to their complaint. So consumers have this opportunity now, as we operate, to take forward the complaints that they have against any business operator providing goods or services. And therefore, these amendments, as I said, were mainly some typographical errors that came up, and one that gave the minister the power to appoint the Director of Consumer Affairs, and it is felt that a public officer should hold that position. These are the main changes to the Act, but we had a lot of debate on it. I remember when it was passed, the Substantive Act number 2 of 2018, and got some very good positive feedback from consumers. And in fact, during the COVID time, there was accusation of price gouging, and people were calling and saying, well, we could complain. We could complain because they remember we passed this bill, But the thing is, they can't remember we put anything in place then, so that people could complain. And that was good, genuine concern that they were raising. Therefore, we moved swiftly to have it published and to set up the unit, and everything is now in place. I want the public to know that they can make full use of the Consumer Affairs Office under the Ministry of Trade to lodge the complaint. So these are the amendments, Mr. Speaker, I wish to highlight. Thank you.
Honourable Representative Forsyth John.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to the amendments to this very important bill, and it's one of the other landmark pieces of legislation that this government has introduced for the well-being of the public, and especially for people that have no voices and no connections in high places. So the amendments to this bill, Mr. Speaker, is very important, because in a society, for it to function properly, because we have business transactions going on, you have to have the rules of engagement. And those rules have to be fairly administered, because in the commercial world, we use money as the source of our transactions, and if you have money, you could get more nice things, more goods and services. So it's a commodity that everybody wants. And in trying to acquire more of that commodity, you have some people that are honest, and then you have some that are very unscrupulous. So that's what this bill tends to do, to make a regulation so that the people you would have recourse. And Mr. Speaker, we see, sometimes you could be operating within the legality or the legal framework, but what you're doing is not fair, and the people could be aggrieved by it. It causes them pain or loss in revenue. For example, we see that before post-Ivan, banks used to close at 4. Right now, it's down at 2. So you have a small business, you have to give somebody a whole half day off to just go and cash a check. And sometimes when you go with the check to the bank, they have the means of knowing the balance in all other branches, because right now we have just maybe 2 banks here, or 3. It's reduced to that amount. But they want to keep your check for a few days, they say, for it to clear. Clear where? But they hang on to it. We look, Mr. Speaker, at another area is like funerals. Small businesses are suffering because people have to get a whole day off to go to a funeral. It used to be 4. Right now it's down to 11. And then they don't come back to work. So although they operate in maybe within the framework, people, they're causing financial pain to small businesses. You have my colleague talk about ICT and the credit card. You have, we use the credit card. They charge you a fee to use it, an annual fee. They're still taking 3% from the business in whose they would be paying the money to. So they're taking on both sides, from the consumer that use it and from the business place. And for instance, I'll give you an example, even operating here. You have Republic would give you a credit card at the branch in Grenada. Then they would send the statement from Trinidad by the post office. It would get here 3-4 days after the due date, right? Then when you go and pay, they're charging you late fees through no fault of your own, and the consumer have no place, no recourse to deal with these unfair things. Sometimes even something as simple as buses. Sometimes, our public transportation closed down early. Some people working as a security guard or a maid. So to get home, the bus is charging you extra than what the fee is, and you want to go, so you have no recourse. And also, the manufacturer, Mr. Speaker, make the bus with to accommodate 15 people. You see, they put in a little box in the middle where you're supposed to walk, just to make it up to 18. No emergency escape. So if you have an accident or fire, whatever, you're trapped in there. So, and these are things that I'm hoping that even though it might be legal, the tribunal created by this legislation could say, well, this is not fair, and that's not supposed to happen. Sometimes you go in the market, you buy pineapple, potato, you reach home, you cut it, and it's rotten on the inside. And they don't want to take it back. And I'm sure people have this experience. So it's not only at the big corporation, even at the local vendor level, you still have these things happening, which is unfair to our consumer. Mr. Speaker, sometimes, and it has happened to me before, I've gone to a lawyer, he take a retainer from me, and the person that I bring, that I went to, he also take a retainer from the other person. You're representing both of us. And then you can't get a lawyer to represent you in court. And it's happening. And sometimes they have no criteria for the retainer. They look at you and they make a price. So, but if these things is just not fair. I mean, we need to have some regulation, or the tribunal should look at these things. And even Sometimes you go to some businesses and you have poor people come down, you take bus, and you're in a line to get your service. And they would not put on another consumer CSR, which is a customer service representative. They don't want to pay additional persons, but you have poor people coming in there in the long line, and that happens especially in areas where you have a monopoly or few people competing against them. I mentioned the last one, Mr. Speaker. And that one is in the courts. You have a case, they want everybody to leave whichever part of the country to be there for 9. And you get there for 9, and you see the judge or the magistrate coming after 10. No regards for people. And then when you get there, they know that the case will be adjourned, But they're still letting you come and waste time, lose your day work to come in there. So people don't want to take anybody to court because most of the times you lose. You're not gaining. So, Mr. Chair, just those are a few of the things that I wanted to mention. And just referring back to the Act, the member from St. David's East, St. David's, right, I think we're trying to divide you. St. David's spoke about most of them, but the clause 2 talk about the changing of the director being appointed by the minister to one being a public officer. And to be honest with you, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if that is good or bad, because you might argue that if the person is a public officer, they do not have to worry about the employment or what the minister say, because the job is secure. But if they're appointed by the minister, they might know that, hey, the job is not that secure, so I would have to perform. So the argument could go both ways, but I guess the people that, the drafters would have additional information that I did not have. It also, clause 6 calls for the removal of the lodging fee, which I support 100%, because most people that come in to make the complaint would not have any additional money to pay to lodge the complaint, because that would be a double whammy for them. So that's, I support this. And clause 4 talked about now having a fee if the matter has to go to the tribunal. And we know that there is a cost, so that I do support. Finally, Mr. Speaker, clause 8 seeks to implement timelines. And that's very important, because here they're talking about maximum 3 months. The existing court system that we have here, the only time I see things happen quickly is if some young person in Gulf Coast a bad word, and then you see the magistrate deal with them the next week. If you have any other matters, land matters or anything like that, or something against a big corporation, you're there for years before your case is called. So at least in this case here, they're talking about 3 months to have your dispute resolved. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr.
Thank you kindly, Representative for St. John. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to this bill and the amendment to the bill before us, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to start with a point that I made when we were discussing the substantive bill. And this has to do with goods, returning goods. I've made the point, Mr. Speaker, that the wholesalers and the importers must be part of the solution. One, when they purchase from abroad, they must ensure that the supplier provides the insurance. Because when the small consumer brings it back to them, they don't want it because they are lost. But they must be able to send it back. So if they do their business right and procure correctly, it might be an added cost, but it will be the insurance for damaged goods, etc. Shipment costs, etc. Sometimes you don't take the shipment costs, and sometimes the little man, if he gets 3/4 of it, he may be happy. But at least, Mr. Speaker, when the wholesalers purchase, and when they purchase from abroad, they must have this, Mr. Speaker. The vehicle companies, maybe they have some of this. They put something new, and they give you within the warranty period, then we'll be able to ship it back to the bigger supplier or to the manufacturer. And that is of fundamental importance. So we must start to do business the new way. Otherwise, we'll always be complaining on this issue. Because the wholesaler will say, well, I cannot lose. The law tells him no, that maybe he has to take it back. So what we must ensure, maybe the Ministry of Trade or whosoever, ensure that we bring them in and tell them, whatever you purchase now, put insurance on it, so that you'll have no problem, and it would not be your loss or your total loss if it is brought back to you. And we have to look after the smaller consumers as well, but we must ensure that the larger ones get it right in their procurement, Mr. Speaker. And the second point I wish to make, Mr. Speaker, is that I welcome this bill, whether it is a process stage 1 in moving towards recourse. We have the Telecommunication Act of 2000. In that Telecommunication Act, there is solid protection for consumers. Sometimes they don't know about it. Sometimes they figure, well, I wouldn't fight it. But if they go to this, Mr. Speaker, they will be advised. And they will be told, you can come to me, but you better apply under this act. And then they will go to the NTRC, who has the power, both as a tribunal, and then you still have the appeals process. And the law is very stringent there. When you're dealing with the tribunal process, you can't appeal to the first instance court, You're appeal to the Court of Appeal in some instances because of the power that this tribunal has. And that's the appeals tribunal. And they make it very difficult, and the qualification is very high on some of those. Lawyers for long outstanding years, appeal judges, those are the people who will sit on the appeal tribunal. For the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission that deals with other utilities except telecommunication, and the only person they know is the electricity utility, but by order of the Governor General, NAWASA could be brought under it, and any utility could be brought under it. And if you have a problem there, this Act 2 has its tribunal to deal with it. It's very specific. Whereas the Consumer Protection Act will direct you into it, they may say we don't have the technical capacity to do this, but at least the small consumer will know I'm going to somebody and they're going to send me the right place. Because you have frequency, 50 cycles in Grenada. You could have a brownout. You could be getting 48.5 and 49. Who measures it? Some equipment, as you put your computer on, it might tell you now that you don't have the right frequency, because a lot of electronic gadget will not operate, if it doesn't have the right frequency. But if that happens, what do? Most people will not want to find the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission office. They will go to this institution. And this institution will tell them, that's the place in fact, they may even assist them in filling out the complaint form. So I welcome it, Mr. Speaker, even if you might say it does not deal with the utilities, but access is of critical importance. And once a small person can get access, because right now, Mr. Speaker, there's only one person, I saw wrote a letter, to the NTRC on a complaint, a valid complaint, but that person was there. That person operated within the ministry, and knows exactly the rules and rights. So that letter went out to the utility, and I know that they're treating it with great importance. But the rank and file will not know that. But going to this Consumer Protection Office that everybody knows about price, bring back me potato, bring back me this, bring back me that, everybody will know that office. And when they get there, they'll be channeled, Mr. Speaker. At least, if the office feels that's the best way, the advisory committee will send them there, Mr. Speaker. So in this context, I could see more of our people accessing the NTRCs and accessing the POC if you get the wrong voltage. For example, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission Act penalizes the company if they give you too much outages, Mr. Speaker. In the Telecommunication Act, you must give 95% of what you say you're going to give for 95% of the time. So when you tell us your speed or your bandwidth, right, is 1 gig, you better give this for 95% of the time. But once you prove it is not so, then the consumer will be reimbursed. It is in the Act. But how many of us know this, Mr. Speaker? So one of the tasks that this institution will be doing is to educating the persons when they come. And they say, well, burn my radio, all right? They go down into it, and even though they don't deal with it, they tell you where to go, and they'll tell you what recompense you should have, Mr. Speaker. So I welcome this act, this amendment to the act, and I know that it will serve our people in the best way, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise to give my full support to the various amendments to this very important bill. I have listened to the member for St. John, and he made some very practical revelations with regards to how consumers could be ripped off if we do not have the basic laws in place to protect them. Therefore, I do not wish to rehash because we are dealing really with specific amendments. But my point is this, Mr. Speaker, that it has to be a continuous process of assessing consumer complaints and making the relevant changes to the Act. So let us not look at this as a one-off, because there's one aspect of consumer protection that I feel very strongly about because I was affected by it, and I believe that any act to protect consumers should include this particular reference I'm making. And it has to do with certain companies asking consumers to pay for warranties, even when the good might be defective when they sell the good. I think it is unconscionable that you go to a certain business place, you buy certain appliances, and they tell you have to pay $200-300 for a warranty. I have never heard of that before. And when you visit certain places, you go to stores in the United States, Canada, I could go in and say, buy a suit today, go to a wedding and bring it back the next day, they will take it. I'm not saying we will do it here. But the fact that you have to pay for a warranty, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe this is fair, and I believe the poor people are being ripped off by these companies, and it's something this bill, in its further amendment, should look into, having to pay for warranty when the defect could be due to the supplier or the provider, not the fault of the consumer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative. Leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As it is said, Mr. Speaker, there is only one point that I wish to raise here, although the member for St. John raised it, and that is where it says here, there shall be a Director of Consumer Affairs Office who shall be an officer in the public service. Mr. Speaker, to me, this is very important because when this bill first came, I asked myself the question where it was stated the minister shall appoint the Director of Consumer Affairs. And we have known from time and time again in this country, sometimes you get service or you get out of service depending on who you know. And if, for instance, I have a problem and the minister appoint the Director of the Consumer Affairs, if I am aggrieved, I may just challenge the aggrieved person and say, I'm going to the minister. And the minister will deal with that person in charge of consumer affairs. So that if it's a business place, the business place and the minister can have a relationship so that the director cannot do his or her job as it should be. But if it's an independent person, then we know this will take away any blame from the minister in that case. So I have always support that part where the person is an independent person so that without interference by the minister or anyone because of his appointment. And I think that will speak good for the independence of that agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable members, Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank all my colleagues for their contribution to the bill. The amendments to this bill, as I indicated, it's timely for consumer protection. And thank the member of St. John for the many examples that he used. Suppose from his experience living in Canada, with consumer protection is very much aware of what exists there. And the bill, the substantive act, seeks to address these issues. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to then commend the bill to second reading.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill entitled Consumer Protection Amendment Bill 2020 be read a second time. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the Consumer Protection Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House resolve itself in the committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, amendment of Section 8 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 2, amendment of Section 8 of Principal Act forms part of the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, amendment of Section 10 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 3, amendment of Section 10 of Principal Act forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, amendment of Section 13 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 4 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 5, correction of numbering of sections 31 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 5 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 6, amendment of section 33 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 6 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 7, amendment of section 34 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 7 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 8, amendment of section 35 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 8 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 9, amendment of section 54 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 9 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 10, amendment of Schedule 1 to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 10 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 11, amendment of Schedule 2 to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 11 forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the House resumes and the chairman of committee report progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this honorable House resumes and the chairman of committee reports progress on the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this House is now resumed. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendment. Honorable Representative for St. David.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the Consumer Protection Amendment Bill 2020.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I requested, and you have so graciously granted, propose that we return to the order on the order paper. And we see the first item, the Coronavirus Disease COVID-19 Control Bill 2020. This House has been advised that the bill has been withdrawn, and officially, for the record, it is still on the order paper. So I now propose, Mr. Speaker, officially that it be withdrawn. and that we go back to the item 2 on the order paper.
Honorable members, the bill, the COVID-19 bill has been withdrawn from the order paper. So it shall not be dealt with at this sitting or until such times as the bill is there.
Mr. Speaker, I do believe that a motion must be moved so to order the bill to be withdrawn.
Any presenter of a bill or motion can withdraw, not necessarily by a motion to withdraw, but a statement to withdraw. Am I correct?
Motion for the withdrawal.
Motion to withdraw. Thank you, Mr. Leader of the Opposition.
Page 49, section 65.
Okay. You're correct. According to page 49, section
49, 65.
Any
Page
bill
49, section 65.
which is in the opinion. Please do.
Yeah. 49, section 65.
Mr. Speaker, before I move the motion, I just says the interpretation is legal. A motion will spark debate, and we can't start debate. The point the withdrawal is to take it off the order paper. So, Mr. Speaker, you have to determine what sort of motion this one will be. Yes? It will come as if you're debating the bill. So, not for its passage, but again, Mr. Speaker, is what you would allow in the motion. Is that right? So I will move the motion for the withdrawal of the bill. Get it? So, okay. So, Speaker, I beg to move that the bill for an act, Coronavirus Disease COVID-19 Control Bill 2020, be withdrawn from the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I do second the motion.
Thank you. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Honorable members, the motion is that the Coronavirus Control Bill 2020 be removed from the order paper and be withdrawn. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. Think the ayes have it? The ayes have it.
Mr.
Leader
Speaker,
of Government Business?
again, I would ask, does the motion require a seconder? Government Business, section page 24.
Are we glad, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition seconded? But
And you're saying on section 30, if it requires
does it require
any explanation?
a second?
Not necessarily, but it is second.
No, we're happy that
Yeah,
we did, but it
yeah.
has to be clear that a government business
Yeah.
does not require a second.
No, no.
Thank you.
Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to move the first motion of the bill, COVID-19 cancellation of Carnival August Celebration Bill 2020.
An act to cancel the Carnival August celebrations for the year 2020 and the recognition of those days as bank holidays, shortly entitled COVID-19 Cancellation of Carnival August Celebrations Bill 2020.
Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance.
Speaker, I therefore move that the relevant standing orders of this House be suspended to allow this bill to be taken through all the stages of this session.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting. Honorable members, those in favor say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Minister for Finance.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I don't move that move the second reading of this bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill, the COVID-19 cancellation of Carnival August Celebration Bill 2020, be read a second time. Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for
Mr.
Finance.
Speaker, in standing to move the second reading of this bill, I need to point out that already this morning I spoke to the concerns of the COVID-19 bill to be brought before this House, which was to be brought before the House, which has been withdrawn, and intentions of it. And, Mr. Speaker, we know that particular Monday in August and the whole day Monday in August and the half day on the second day has been designated bank holiday period for our national August Carnival celebrations. This year it was supposed to be in August 10th, the Monday, and the 11th, Tuesday. In the context of the tremendous problems that we recognize with the pandemic that we all are facing, in fact, Mr. Speaker, it must be clear that in February this year, late February, when the virus was already affecting the world, and many did not realize the extent of it, as something I pointed out when I went to Guyana. Trinidad Carnival took place. Subsequently, there was obvious from all reports that there was in fact a level of infestation in Trinidad due to that national celebrations where a mass of people would be interacting, sweating, talking to each other, hugging, and all sorts of things, and the carnival is what it is. It is a physical thing in a lot of sense of the word. So, in the face of what is evident of the problem that countries around the world, in fact, Mr. Speaker, I want to make this point. I was watching television one evening, and I saw a young lady, it's about 20 years, in Miami, speaking to the world and her young people, and saying that her state was locked down. When they opened up for bars and restaurants, a lot of her friends and her went to a particular bar, and because of the lockdown and the atmosphere of freedom, they really had a time, the ball. About a week later, 21 of their friends, including her, were infected. That is the extent of how fast this virus affects people and large numbers of persons with that sort of interaction. It was reported recently, the Marlins baseball team, they tested them before they started the training session. Everyone was tested positive. In the space of a week and a half after the training session, they tested them regularly, like they were doing with all the West Indies players recently. 11 of them came down with positive tests. And a couple of days later, up to this morning, 4 more. So 15 members of a 30-member team. So it is now under serious consideration whether the Miami Marlins could in fact take part in the season at all. Because the amount of games they will miss, because mostly all their stars. In fact, it is felt that they may not be competitive even if they proceeded to use the other 15 members. And you don't know between now and the time they start the season whether more of the 15 left. The point really we're making is, I know how much our people depend on Carnival. I know how much they enjoy it. I know how much the young people in particular, and even the businesses that have suffered a lot already, depend on some sort of celebration activities to make a dollar. So we know we are asking people to make a lot of sacrifices. We know how we have become the country that is identified with jab. It has become almost an international thing after Talpri's expose. So we know people look forward to coming to Grenada for Carnival. It's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Government revenues would be helped exceedingly so. It is in our interest financially to have Carnival. I enjoy it myself. I don't play much, but I enjoy it. But what is first, Mr. Speaker? As I pointed out this morning, the first thing is the protection of our people, the health. What is the revenue in government? What is the revenue to a shopkeeper or a business person when he or she doesn't have health? What does the revenue mean to government? When the people that the government is supposed to be protecting, the government picks up more revenue and a lot of people get infected and some go through some serious illness and problems that can affect them for life. Because there is quite a strong evidence, Mr. Speaker, that this virus is not something that some people recover, and when after it was physical afterwards, they seem not to have any lingering problems. But for others, some have had permanent damage to liver and other organs of the body. You don't know, we don't know what inside of us right now is not functioning at its optimal. And you don't want to test it. The president say testing, but he can test, but I ain't testing no part of my body, but nothing that I don't believe is right. So we have to come to terms with all our good intention. That's why I'm appealing to our friends this morning and who have problems with the COVID-19 Act, and as I said before, understand it. At the same time, please do the same thing. Call on people not to use that as a basis for trying to go against the protocols and the rules that we established to protect them. Because some people say the government was dictatorial with the COVID-19 Act, and the dictatorial trying to get rid of our jab and our celebration and carnival. That could be the mindset. And we decided will defy us. And just last week, as the minister had pointed out, you have jab on the beach. Oh, what's going on? Because we're afraid to lose 2 votes, we're going to say, go ahead and do it, and we won't interrupt. My friend, Mr. Speaker, I've told my colleagues, leadership requires guts. Leadership requires a responsibility to do what is right, not always what is popular. And I've always told my colleagues, for my 35 years experience in politics, the noises you hear today is not permanent noise. Is what is right becomes permanent. That is what survives. That is my experience in 35 years. I've seen situations where it looked bleak, as if you are dead politically and otherwise. And you took a decision based on what is right. Those who curse you today praise you tomorrow. That is a fact. As long as you are doing it for what you believe is right. Even when you're wrong, Mr. Speaker, even when the result for what you took a decision on turns out wrong, but they believe you are genuinely feeling what you're doing is right, people forgive you. Good people forgive you. Those who have ulterior motives and full of hate and spite, they are the ones that keep the permanent opposition to things that you do, which is interested. So I'm convinced, Mr. Speaker, to have the holiday is to encourage people to have masks, to encourage people to jab in the thousands and the hundreds and the tens, and we have got major problem because with the border opening, more people will be coming from different parts, and you never know. As the minister pointed out, one came in with a positive test a few days ago. That one person can go into a celebration on the beach and infect 20 and 30 people. Then 20 and 30 people go out in the villages and infect hundreds. Where are the beds in the hospital for 100 ICU patients? We in government, if we allow that, we better run from town, because people will deal with us accordingly. So, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the point I just made, is this. We have had 3 months of literally no productivity. Businesses are hurting. Government revenue, I looked at the inland revenue data last night, 50%, 3 more days to go. You know, that remind me of in the 80s and 90s in government, when you budget for revenue for say $100 million in customs and inland revenue, $47 million you were earning. So, you know, that's why we had to go and bank borrowing money to pay salaries and so on, because you weren't getting revenue. Not there wasn't revenue, the collection process was extremely bad. And people were doing their own thing, and the government showed they did not have the capacity in terms of the systems in place to collect the appropriate revenue. Well, if we are collecting 50% and we are helping hotel workers that we are not responsible for directly so, but morally responsible for. If we are helping all the different sectors of the country that we're helping, if every day we've been asked to do more and more, and people start believing government has some sort of empty chest, some chest or a filled chest that they can just go and pick up money, we'll be fooling ourselves and fooling people. Already, we've seen the serious drop in our fiscal situation that was extremely stable. The only reason, Mr. Speaker, we have been able to continue to do what we're doing is because of the way we managed the country in the last from 2013, and the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Public Management Act, and other acts that we put in place have satisfied the international community. Therefore, we are getting support more than any other country in the region because of the IDA support that we are qualified for most countries did not qualify for because of the sacrifice would be made. But if we overplay our hand, Mr. Speaker, and the deficit becomes a problem, we will lose all that possibilities that we have. So I'm saying the government revenues also has to be a concern. And the business persons and the persons around the country who have been having to bear the brunt of a lot of the problems we face would also. So why would we go and give another holiday? Well, it's 2 days, because if you tell somebody they have to go Tuesday's holiday, forget it. The man will live Saturdays and come in town just to go to work for 3 hours a day. Sometimes they come in, they reach 10 o'clock and they want to go for lunch at 11:30. So if they know they're coming just for half day, you're not going to see them. So you know it's 2 days you're talking about, and 2 days loss of productivity further. So on these two bases, Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe it would be unwise, maybe a little bit unpopular, but I believe it would be the wise decision and the right one. And I honestly believe, Mr. Speaker, I go to church on Sundays, and I see how the religious community have been so positive in the approach in meeting what we have asked them to. In the right church, I see the distancing. I see the older people, they're not coming, because the priests and others, they go to them sometime on Sundays. But the young people, and everybody distancing, and they have marks where you can stand. You can't go past this. And this thing about going around giving handshake, they say bow, everybody bowing. The discipline is so good. Even the Adventist Church, Mr. Speaker, up to now they're doing virtual services. Although we've said they can, but just keep the protocols. But they are so disciplined in their approach and so protective of their constituents that they really, my feeling is, if we allow this carnival and we allow this mass gathering, we're going to hear from those churches. And they will be quite right to condemn all of us. And you and I know, while the carnival is a positive in some sense, there's some displays that take place is almost can be seen as anti-Christian. The morality issue is becoming a problem. The embarrassment that some of us, when you look at some people on the street, it's better they just didn't put on nothing. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is that really a carnival? Is that what we want to project? Right? And I'm not sure that is going to be. But if we allow it, and that excesses continue, which it will, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Mr. Speaker, therefore, I take this special opportunity to move the second reading of this bill and ask for passage of the second reading. Thank you.
Honorable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the bill, the amendment bill as presented, COVID-19 Cancellation of Carnival Celebrations Bill 2020. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, Carnival is good for tourism. Carnival is very, very good for tourism. Carnival has contributed in putting our country as a serious destination competitor for experience. People like to go to countries where they can have experience, where they can have fun, and for quality entertainment. Our artists have excelled in country, regionally and internationally. They have performed well. I will just give two stats to show how important Carnival is to tourism. In 2018, we had, during the Carnival period, which is about a month, a couple of weeks before and a few days after Carnival, we had 12,379 visitors to our shores. And that was a dramatic increase over 2017. And in 2019, we had about 1,000 increase of 13,327. And what we were hearing, people who came for Carnival in 2019, they were booking before they left Grenada for 2020. Persons were calling in. We saw more visitors booking with bands to play Carnival in the bands. So 2020 would have been bumper for us. It would have been extremely significant, and coming after COVID, that is a big whammy for tourism. But, Mr. Speaker, there are things like life and health that are more important. I like traditional mass. I like it even more because for the past few years, traditional mass has been celebrated in St. Mark. But personally, I like traditional mass because I like my shorty. Even when I drag in Mr. Speaker, I buy my clothes and I wear my shorty clothes. I like the carnival. I like the spirit. I like to see our people enjoying themselves. But Mr. Speaker, as much as I like that, and I care about the people who would have earned a living by it throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, Carriacou for another time. However, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, health and life are certainly more important than making a dollar or enjoying Carnival and Jab for a while. 2 days, and it's over. And what can we have in the aftermath of those 2 days? We have seen some of our sister islands, like for example, St. Vincent, they have canceled Carnival. And it means a lot to them as well, but they made a wise decision, and we have taken this same pathway based on sound medical advice and also just empirically what we see. So for example, we have seen the negative impact of gatherings internationally. Small gatherings and large, it doesn't have to be large. But a party of 17 in New Jersey, and I have relatives in New Jersey, 17 went to a party, 17 contracted the disease, and several of them died. I don't remember the exact amount, but more double figures died. So a significant number died. A family had a dinner. Family. They all loved one another. And gradually, every day you saw the news, 2 persons, the parents went first, and sisters and brothers, and everybody lamenting that, you know, they had that dinner, and somebody is grieving because he or she would have brought that virus into the family environments. And we have seen it. Persons going into their parents' home or living with their parents, and the parents are home, but they bring it in. And, you know, the remorse and the grief, they have to get counseling for it. Is that what we are looking for? Just for 2 days of fun? Mr. Speaker, this thing is very serious. And through you, I want to speak to all my Grenadian brothers and sisters, nephews, nenen, whatever. Let us take this thing seriously. We're saying, some people even go as far as saying that it don't have virus. I heard they say it about AIDS. But the board statistics would show a lot of people died before we realized that AIDS does exist. And the virus does exist. The thing is, sometimes when a government performs well, and a Ministry of Health performs well, and we have managed to keep this thing down, people, instead of realizing that it took effort, it took work, and it took astuteness, and dedicated, not just work, but dedicated work day after day, to monitor this thing, what's happening outside. And a lot of the things, the examples we had didn't happen here, but it doesn't have to happen to you for it to be true. And so we learn from that, I'm sure the minister and his team were perusing what CDC was saying, WHO, and all of this guidance, and CARFA and whoever else, and just seeing what happened when people complied. You see the numbers go down. And when people break away, like they went in the beach in Miami and they went crazy. New Orleans had carnival. And what happened to the numbers? They soared. So there are too many examples for us to ignore just because we've been doing well. Let us praise God in the first instance, praise the scientific staff, the team, and others who worked. But let us be wise. Mr. Speaker, through you, I want to beg that we continue on the trajectory that we are on, the path that we have carved as a nation, because every one of us makes sacrifices. And let us not throw those sacrifices down the drain. As much as we like Carnival, as much as it does for the economy, I would beg everyone, let us comply, let us leave the job for a while. Next year it's going to be bigger, it's going to be better for us, but we have to make the sacrifice now. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. Bark and Minister for Tourism. I know how you feel, I imagine. Honorable Representative for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this bill. Mr. Speaker, it is, like with most of us, if not all of us, with a heavy heart. Mr. Speaker, I like my carnival. I play Pretty Mouse. I play Jab Jab. I support Panorama not just as a spectator, but financially as well, Panorama. I haven't played in a while, but yes. I said farewell to a dear friend of mine who we played Jab Jab together for years. I know, like anybody else, that you say, I work hard or see trouble for the year, I'm going to play a mass. And this year of all years, most of us, if not all of us, have seen trouble and would be looking to play that mass. But we would be reversing all of the sacrifices, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not the desire of a cruel, authoritarian government or so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not political policy. This is scientific fact. COVID-19 is a contagious disease. COVID-19 spreads through mass events. And Mr. Speaker, we are not the only ones coming to this conclusion. St. Vincent on April 2nd announced the cancellation of their carnival. St. Lucia on the 27th of March announced the cancellation of their carnival. Antigua on the 19th of April announced the cancellation of their carnival. Barbados, that same day, announced the cancellation of their carnival, or Kadooment and Crop Over as they call it. Martinique announced the cancellation of their Saint-Pierre celebration, which is similar, around the same time. Dominica has cancelled their jazz and Creole for this year as well, around the same time. That's not because this government has asked them to do it, and that we are just coming up with something in isolation. That is responsible governments throughout the region following the scientific fact. Mr. Speaker, F1 was cancelled. It's now back, but with no spectators, no mass gathering, just the drivers on the road. Football, FA Cup, UEFA, Serie A, they've all been accommodating that just the team, but no spectator, no mass gathering. We are no different than any of the responsible governments that recognize that mass events will cause the spread of COVID-19. And for those who say, well, we don't have no COVID in Grenada right now, I don't know that for a fact, and I'm the Minister of Health. And we as a responsible government are not prepared to play Russian roulette with the population. So, Mr. Speaker, my final words too is that there are some out there who are provoking this, but they themselves will stay home. They themselves are wearing the mask. They are provoking this just to see civil disorder because it's not their watch. Well, this is our watch, and we have to do the responsible thing, Mr. Speaker. So regrettably, with a heavy heart, I stand in support of this bill. My birthday is August 11th, usually around Carnival as well. Another reason to celebrate. But this year, no Carnival, no large gatherings, moderation, so that all of the sacrifices will continue to be worthwhile. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. George South. We have to talk something about this jab. We're going to talk about it. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a few comments. Support. And I do have some comments to make. I don't do jab. I never did pretty mass. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, it's a very quiet time for me. But I do enjoy and listen to a good calypso and a good piece of pan. I have family who would chase Carnival, whether it's in St. Vincent or Barbados or Fort-de-France, they go. But I never pursue. But, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that if I take it from a scientific point of view, that there is some science in being alone together. Stay home. If you have the COVID, or just stay home. You don't have to go out. Alone together. Someone asked me what it means. I say it means that you're protecting others when you stay at home. But, Mr. Speaker, from this point of view, I raise concerns that were raised to me by a few employees in some businesses, that they worked as almost essential workers in stores and so forth, and all during the COVID time they were out at work. And lo and behold, the 2 weeks holiday was taken from them, even in that light. And so they were looking forward maybe for that 2 days pay for Carnival in terms to do their own private business. They don't take part in Carnival. But that too, they feel, is taken away from them. And the question is asked, what can we do about it? Some people feel that they have given yeoman service during this time. And even the 2 weeks they had, well, they realized that they had to sacrifice. And maybe a couple of them made plans to do things with their family and to go and see friends. Even some of our friends here were planning to go home to Carriacou for the 2 weeks, 2 days, which they always do. They call it long weekend. You leave Friday, you come back Monday afternoon or Tuesday or even Wednesday. And so with that out, that cannot be done again. But, Mr. Speaker, I would tell us, and I can look at it from a scientific point of view, because in my humble opinion and in my little disposition, I studied science. I mean, I stand in this parliament here, Mr. Speaker, and I never did political science as a degree. I did chemistry and biology. And as an instructor of biochemistry and molecular biology, I think just before COVID, just the week before the lockdown, I had a class where we were changing a bacteria by placing in E. coli a plasmid DNA, and you could change the form and so forth. And remember the last time when I was here, Mr. Speaker, I said I had the opportunity to read probably one of the biggest texts that I ever read was on the Spanish epidemic of 1919. And it is said that the Spanish epidemic killed between 40 to 60 million people worldwide before it was over. That's a lot of people. Mind you, we did not have the medical facilities that we have now and the knowledge and the medicine. And I said then that the world went into 3 lockdown stages. The first one, the second one, and the third one. And they could not get over it. In that same documentary too, I read that in the city of San Francisco, they had a curfew order, and the police was ordered to shoot anybody violating that curfew. We do not have that in Grenada. I do not ever believe we will get to that point. But what I am saying, follow the science. You know, as opposition leader, I was called, Mr. Clement, you're not doing your work, because here 3 persons leave Grenada and go to Trinidad and they're positive, and you're not saying anything. I had a conversation with the minister. I asked him, he said to me, we found out that were the people around tested? He says the roommate of the guy was tested and he did not have it. The wives of the 2 gentlemen were tested and they did not have it. And with the virulence of COVID-19, how could I be living with somebody, or even my wife? I test positive and they did not. And what I am saying, Mr. Speaker, unless that PCR test is done to verify that there is indeed COVID-19 in one's body, even at a certain amount that can be transmitted, then we cannot say that person is definitely positive. The test, the scientific test, must be done. So important it is. And I pray that we will all take a step back, because it is as serious as it can get. I know earlier on you spoke about losing one of your friends, and I remember one day I was home and my wife called out to me and said, Toby, I have something to tell you, but you have to sit down. And I sat down and she said to me, Mom just called and said Roy passed away in New York. And if I know Roy Clement, which is Glenn Clement and Osprey, them brother, he's one of my biggest fan and supporter. And it was like it hit home. And it is in situations like these that you realize that maybe what happened 100 years ago is happening again today. We are in a little better position because we have the science, we have the training, we have the medical facilities, we have the machineries to help us. But if it is a little longer that we may have to stay locked down or in this form of difference, then let it be so. I say to Mr. Speaker that protocol, that's why when I speak to people, I say go even beyond the protocol that is established, because you're not only protecting yourself, you're protecting your family, you're protecting your friends, and you're protecting others. You know, I remember when I first saw the news, the virus was still in China. And I remember telling my work colleagues, I said to them, make sure you get your masks and everything. I went into ACE and I got some masks. Then later on I had to distribute it because it was N95 masks. The first time when I went into ACE, maybe a couple days after with my mask on, the security chastised me that I was wearing a mask. But Mr. Speaker, you see, and this is knowledge is power. And so this is what we have to continue to educate our people in the virulence of COVID-19. It's not to be played with. It's not to be trifled with, especially in this time. And in these times, I also do, Mr. Speaker, understand our limitations here in Grenada. And I know we have to open up. But what I am most concerned about, Mr. Speaker, we cannot look at somebody and say that they have COVID-19. Because probably 85 to 90% of the person who contract COVID-19 will show no signs or symptoms. They're asymptomatic. And even so too, you might be tested and test negative, fine. But what about the test? The test that was done in Trinidad, they were false negative. Some of the tests give false negative, some of the tests give false positive. So even if people come in and they test negative, we still have to let them exercise that precaution and to behave as if you want to stop that transmission. Because it is possible that the plane that came in last Wednesday, maybe the test that is done might have missed one or two. What happened in that case? Is it that someone is moving around Grenada with COVID-19? We do not know. The test that is done, Mr. Speaker, is not exactly 100% bulletproof. So we have to behave ourselves and behave ourselves wisely so that we can live maybe to fight another day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Minister for Finance and Prime Minister. Second reading. Yeah, I moved it. I moved it. Now as it's finished.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to move the move that move that to resolve ourselves, the committee of the whole house, to consider the bill.
Well, I'll have to move it.
Yes,
what happened?
I thought so. I didn't think I was wrong, but I said. I thought so. Let me cover that. All of us getting lost. Aye. Yeah, I think we all got a bit lost there, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, but we didn't ask for the vote. Yeah.
I'll read a second time.
Yeah.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the COVID-19 Cancellation of Carnival August Celebrations Bill 2020.
For a move that the House resolve itself in the committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that the committee resolve itself into the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, the House now stands in committee.
Clause 2, cancellation of Carnival August celebrations.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 2, cancellation of August Carnival celebration, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
And the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, move that the chairman reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report progress of the bill. Honorable members, I have to report that the bill was considered. We didn't come out of committee. What is wrong with me? Okay. Honorable members, the question is that this honorable House resumes. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Then I will move that the
Honorable members, this honorable House now resumes.
Mr. Speaker, I move therefore that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Therefore now move, Mr. Speaker, the third reading of the bill and its passage.
Honorable members, the question proposes that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the COVID-19 Cancellation of Carnival August Celebrations Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative for St. George's South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of a bill entitled Consumer Protections Amendment Act 2020.
No. This one went first.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Public Finance Management Amendment Act 2020.
Yeah. That is number 3 on your book.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Public Finance Management Amendment Bill 2020.
Yes, for finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know to add. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The designation doesn't fit at all. I know a little maths, but this statistician there is way above my limit. Mr. Speaker, I rise to present the bill on the Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020. I beg to introduce this bill for first reading. The act is shortly entitled Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill we're dealing with now is the Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill. First reading. For the first reading.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Minister for Tourism and Parliamentary St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of this House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this time.
Honorable members, the question is that the relevant standing orders of the House be suspended to enable the bill to be taken to all its stages at this sitting. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of this bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that that bill be read a second time. Honorable Representative.
Mr. Speaker, the Tourism Authority Act number 42 of 2013, it confers on the GTA, the Grenada Tourism Authority, the right or the responsibility to regulate tourism accommodation facilities in this tri-island state. This responsibility is extremely important. It is critical to the integrity and the growth of our industry. And so this body, the GTA, is responsible for setting standards and monitoring to ensure that there is compliance with all the standards that have been set. We have built a brand that is well regarded within the region and worldwide, and this must be maintained and allowed to grow. The Act, Mr. Speaker, we also know that in this day of social media, it just takes one bad apple. One establishment that doesn't comply with the standards, that is not regulated, and whatever goes wrong could be sent worldwide, could go viral, and this one act, negative act, any one negative act, could tarnish the name, the brand of our destination, and cause persons not to come, and of course, negatively impact on the ability of our destination to really make a serious contribution to the economy of this country. Mr. Speaker, this amendment is very short and simple. It has 4 clauses. One of these clauses speaks to the interpretation, and it speaks to the number of rooms, and that is the main thing that has to be dealt with in this amendment. The Act of 2013, it describes an apartment as a sleeping accommodation and self-catering facility which provides 3 or more self-contained units. And so we are saying that whether it's 1 unit, whether it's 2 units, once you offer services to people, it must be of a certain basic standard that is acceptable nationally and is acceptable regionally and internationally. Any visitor who comes should find acceptable services, and more than acceptable service, but exemplary service. And so we have a number of facilities in Grenada, 1-bedroom facility, 2-bedroom facilities, and well, of course, 3 and up, as has been traditional. And the 3 and up have been licensed and registered by the GTA, but those of 1 and 2 bedroom facilities have not been. So apartments, guest houses of 3 bedrooms and up, villas of 3 bedrooms and up are not included in the 2013 Act, Act number 42. And therefore, we thought that we needed to include them for two reasons. One, to ensure that there is uniformity of a basic standard in our country, and we keep our Pure Grenada brand pure. But also, secondly, because these facilities, they are growing. They are growing in our country. At this time, we have about 1,000 facilities that have active listings. We perhaps have double that some that are not listed, maybe another 1,000 that are not listed. But we do know in every nook and cranny, persons have facilities that they offer for a fee, sleeping facilities, that several of them are not registered. And they have not been breaking the law because the law speaks to 3 and above. But we believe that these need to be regulated and that we must give them the opportunity to be able to market themselves as a registered facility. Only very recently with the COVID-19, with the stimulus package, a number of different entities in the industry, not just accommodation, but other things like transportation and so on, they had to be advised, go and get registered first. Get registered with Grenada Tourism Authority, get registered with NIS and so on. Do what you have to do, the prerequisites, to ensure that you are operating legally. And we find these facilities, these Airbnb facilities as we call them, island-wide. So it gives various areas, every corner in this country. And the great thing about Grenada is that anywhere you go, any parish you go, you can find facility, you can find attractions, you can find entertainment. If well developed and well managed, you can find entertainment, you can find beautiful sceneries that people could go and live in these areas and thoroughly enjoy it, especially if they love the environment and they love nature. So that gives the existing ones the opportunity to operate in a licensed manner. And it also gives other people the ideas. Well, if they're licensed in 1 bedroom, let me go and use my 1 bedroom, because there are still many people who have a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom facility that they're not using. People love Airbnb. Some people prefer it to a hotel. They like to go and live in community. And so through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to encourage all Grenadian people to get into Airbnb. It is a thriving business. As I said, there are a number of people that this is their preference, and we want to see tourism really genuinely be everybody's business. And it cannot be everybody's business if it is only limited to the very south of the island. We want to let them roam wherever, be free to wander wherever they could. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, what it does is increase the room stock. And when we go to discuss airlift or flights into Grenada, one of the first questions is how many rooms you have. And they don't only ask how many 5-star rooms you have or 4, because a room is a room, because 5-star has its people, 3-star, and 1 bedroom has its people. But it does give us leverage in negotiating for airlift into the country. So it's 1 more seat, 2 more seats if it's a couple, whatever. But overall, it does add to our room stock, and it does give people island-wide the opportunity to earn a living. So, Mr. Speaker, in these 3 definitions, where it speaks to an apartment, where it speaks to a villa, or whether it speaks to a guest house, we can change it around to mean every facility, every establishment where accommodation is provided for a fee. So if we just remove the 3 bedrooms, the terminology under apartments, if we remove 3 bedrooms, in the case of the apartment, 3 units, 3 or more self-contained units in the case of the apartments, in the case of guest house and the villa, 3 or more bedrooms, that would suffice to make the change that we want to make. Mr. Speaker, also, Clause 2 of this bill, or Clause 3 also seeks to decrease the penalty for non-compliance with licensing requirements. So, as I will read, it moves it from a fine not exceeding $50,000. So the penalty for non-compliance with the licenses requirements in the Principal Act, it has a fine not exceeding $50,000, means it will go up to $50,000, or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 years. And this we are requesting, Mr. Speaker, in this amendment, that this be reduced to a lesser penalty of a fine not exceeding $1,000, from $50,000 to $1,000, or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months. Mr. Speaker, we also, this part, Mr. Speaker, continues where the person is convicted and fined, and where the offense continues after that person is convicted, that person is guilty of a continuing offense and is liable to a fine not exceeding $250. It was in the substantive, or in the Principal Act, it says $2,500. That is the fine for continued, how shall I say it, non-compliance with the licensing requirements. So we're moving again from $2,500 to $250 for each day during which the offense is continued. So while we are going to lessen on it, we do not think that this in any way should lessen the magnitude of the offense. It is very serious, and it is a serious transgression against the tourism industry and everyone who makes a living out of that, because this can have rippling effect. And in these days of information technology and all the social media, one person just has to send something on Facebook or whatever, and it could negatively impact us. So the fact that the fine is being reduced doesn't mean that the offense is any less and given any less consideration. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 allows for a grace period of 90 days for the facilities or the accommodation of 1 and 2 bedrooms. We know it will take some time for persons to adjust, some time for them to find the money and perhaps come up to speed with the requirements. So 90 days would be 3 months is given in the first instance. Mr. Speaker, I say this being very much aware that we are in a difficult period, and persons might be disincentivized to do any serious effort to bring their facilities up to the standard, because they might feel, well, who is coming or when are they coming? How will I get my money back? But I just want to end by saying that tourism is a very resilient industry. Even now, as we're speaking to the cruise lines, we're speaking to the airlines, people are still booking. Not in the numbers that they have been booking, but one would think, because as my brother from St. David said, and I don't know if it's St. David's East or West, but my brother from St. David said, I don't want to go anywhere. But some people are hearing about us. This morning, we are named, this country was named in BBC radio station number 2, whatever that means, by a certain gentleman. And that is a well-listened to station. And otherwise, you've seen other programs on BBC and elsewhere where the Caribbean as a whole is being spoken about. The cruise ships want to come back. And we are just saying, take your time. Don't get frightened, Brother Bowen. We're saying, let us take our time with that. But the point is, if we're not ready, when people start coming back, some people will get left. So let us not be daunted by what is going on now. This industry has rebounded time after time, after Hurricane Ivan, after a number of other hurricanes that swept Windward and Leeward Islands and so on. Maria was a very serious one, but countries are rebounding, and so we will. And if people take the time off now, it will pay back. I just want to say, finally, that the government has provided a very nice soft loan. I think it's about 7 million with the Grenada Development Bank for facilities to improve themselves, to upgrade. And while there has been some uptake, I do not see enough. I think that is a great opportunity. It's 2% interest for a while, so catch it while you can. And I also think there is a moratorium, but the details can be had at the Grenada Development Bank. I want to encourage everyone to ensure that your facility is in line in keeping with the Grenada Bank. Let us keep pure Grenada on the map. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister for Tourism. Honorable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to the Minister for Tourism in presenting this very important bill, amendment to the Tourism Act. Mr. Speaker, I do agree with the Minister or the member for St. Mark that in an expanding industry, in an area where accommodations are increasing, whether it's hotel room stock, villas, apartments, condominiums, there is need to regularize or to standardize those facilities. And mention was made of that emerging subsector of product, B&B, a breakfast and bed. This is a rapidly growing subsector. As a matter of fact, over 100, close to 200 countries now consider this to be an integral part of the tourism product. And in terms of monetary value, we're talking about over $25 billion annually generated from Airbnb. In our context, Mr. Speaker, it is an important sector as well. And many homeowners, especially in the countryside, are now getting involved because they do have spare rooms, 1 or 2 rooms that they will want to make available for guests. However, Mr. Speaker, I do have an added concern. With the onslaught of COVID-19, I think there is greater awareness as to who are the people coming into our country, where they are going, and hence the reason why regulations have been put in place to govern the operations of hotels, guest houses, so as to contain this virus. However, I cannot recall any mention being made of those 1 or 2 bedroom facilities that are primarily in private homes. So whereas it might be very easy to establish regulations for hotels or guest houses, where you have private homes being used for public purposes, one room in my private house, I am wondering how effective or how significant will be those regulations. If you want to standardize, can you standardize this? Can you say that the same regulation that you apply for hotel rooms, you could apply for those Airbnb facilities as well in my private home? That would be one of my concerns, because you have intermingling of guests with private residents in the same house. So in terms of regulations, not only in terms of standardizing what the members said, but in terms of the COVID regulations, now that we are in this new norm, how can that be done? I would like further explanation how effective those regulations could apply to those facilities. And I'm also a bit concerned that at a time when we need to strengthen regulations and enforce those regulations, we are lowering the penalties. I would have thought that in a COVID environment, we will want to increase the penalties for non-compliance because, you're talking about something very serious. Yeah? So I'm wondering whether that was taken into consideration in making the change in terms of lowering the penalties. Now that we have an environment where we want people to comply, because failure to comply, because if you look at the COVID Act that was supposed to be submitted here, stiff penalties. But yet I'm seeing a reduction in terms of application in this particular area. So Mr. Speaker, while I support the idea of including facilities with lower number of rooms as part of the overall tourism regulation for consistency and for ensuring that you have a standardized facilities and the quality of service, I am concerned about two things. One, how applicable will be the COVID regulations for such facilities in private homes, and why should we be reducing penalties in an environment that necessitates higher penalties for non-compliance? These are the two concerns I have, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Representative for St. Patrick West. Honourable Representative for St. George, Tongue of St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to the amendment to the bill as presented by the Minister of Tourism, the member for St. Mark. I absolutely agree with this amendment and the implications for the tourism industry. There is a need to expand room stock, and I think the Minister said it, and I'll just be repeating. But one of the biggest challenges in getting airlines into the country is rooms. You know, it's a chicken and the egg. Do you have which comes first? And the truth is, craft, people have no place to stay. People will not be booking. So it's absolutely important to expand that base of rooms. A lot has been done with this minister and previous ministers with respect to getting the hotels. We have hotels coming in St. David. I think there's a lovely project, the Six Senses Hotel, now starting construction in St. David. There's the Royal Town. There's several hotels in the north of the island, in the Vera. There are many hotels coming on stream, the larger hotels. And that is fine, and that's a five-star brand, as the minister alluded to. But as the minister did indicate, there are various levels that people want to come and spend their time. Not everybody wants to go into a five-star. Not everybody can afford a five-star. Some people want a two-star, three-star. Some people like rooms. And the Airbnb, as the member for St. Patrick just indicated, is an up-and-coming. In fact, I have many friends who have converted their houses, their homes, into Airbnb to take advantage of this new and emerging market. So I want to say that this is good. But I want to ask that not only do we approve or decline the request, but we work with and the minister alluded to that, we work with the new small hoteliers, if you may call them that, the persons with the small, we work with them to improve the standards. Because it's, you know, we need, and I know the minister has been working on this, more hospitality training facilities. But we must ensure that everyone who is involved in the industry has some level of training so that Grenada is not only known for beautiful beaches, known for lovely, hospitable persons, but our service must be to the standard. When you go to places in Southeast Asia, in India and places like that, service is amazing because they have had a long history of a tourism industry. Our tourism industry is relatively new, relatively recent. We've come from an agricultural tradition. Now we're combining agriculture and tourism. So we're having agri-tourism, if you want to call it that, as our main economic base. So I want to urge the minister and the ministry and the GTA to work with the persons with the 1 and 2 bedrooms to do training to ensure that everyone, not only the guys in the 4-star and 5-star hotels, are well trained, but the persons in the smaller units are just as well trained to take care of the persons who are Not that Airbnb requires much, but whatever they require, that the requirements are met with a certain standard. So I want to urge that, and I want to urge us to move quickly to get more hospitality training. So I want to support it. I understand the reason for the fine reduction, because now you're addressing very small hotel, very small units, and you have to adjust it to suit that. So I know the minister will address that issue, but I just want to stand in to give full support to the move by the GTA, the move by the minister, and the move by the Minister of Tourism to ensure that rooms are provided and that Grenada's tourism industry expands and achieves the potential it is capable of achieving. With that, I beg to support the amendment as presented. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Huh? No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it seems that my two brothers did some serious research on it. And, you know, I realized the time, but Airbnb is an exciting thing in some countries. I mean, they set a whole thing around it. They order babysitters. So if it's a family, so the owner of the facility, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, 3-bedroom, you have 1 or 2 people who are babysitters that you train or get them trained. And so if the parents want to go out, they know that the children are in safe hands. If the parents don't want to go out and they want to go to Fish Friday, they have a taxi, like a family taxi man, comes and he takes the children to Fish Friday, he takes them back. And so there's a kind of security that people find. I mean, Barbados has done it par excellence. Jamaica and a few other countries. And Grenada is growing, as they said, and I take the points that my colleagues would have mentioned. I think we have to go to the drawing board a little bit in terms of the training that we have to do and the support. And while we have decreased the fine tremendously, we hope that the advice on the training and support that is given will compensate for any kind of misunderstanding that is a small fine, so it's not important. And so let us leave it as a fine that will never have to be paid, I hope, and we don't want to be draconian either. But I take the points, Mr. Speaker, and I will relay that to the GTA to see how we can give support. But as was said before, everything that was said is very much in place. So, Mr. Speaker, I again want to commend this bill.
The question is that the Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020 be read a second time. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative Fawcett Mark, Minister for Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Those who are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this Honorable House is now in committee.
Clause 4, Clause 2, Amendment of Section 2 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Section 2, Amendment of Section 2 to Principal Act forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 3, Amendment of Section 52 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 3, Amendment of Section 52 of Principal Act forms part of the bill? Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, transitional provision.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 4, transitional provisions, forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Clause 1, short title.
Honorable members, the question is that clause 1, short title, forms part of the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable member for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I beg that the House resumes and the chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this honorable House resumes and the chairman of committee reports progress on the bill. Those who are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this honorable House resumes. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed without amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move.
No, you're still in committee?
We're still in committee. We're still in committee.
Huh?
Mr. Chairman, I beg that the committee's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
If you'll please permit me one moment. Which one is it? One you gave me.
Do we have?
Yes, you gave me. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that we recommit again to committee sitting, just so that we can clarify one issue.
Honorable members, the question is that we resume to committee so as to address some amendments to the bill. Those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The House now stands in committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to speak specifically to Clause 3, which is Section 52 of the Principal Act, where it says, where the offense is continued after conviction, that person is guilty of a continuing offense and is liable to a fine, and we want to remove not exceeding, or just off? And is liable to a fine of $250. What do we
Let us get it right.
We take off out.
Right now, so we're taking out the
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, so it says it's liable to a fine not exceeding $250 for each day. So what we have to amend here, where it says a fine of $250, we are asking that that be replaced with not exceeding, and we remove off.
Right, so a fine not exceeding $250. So we're going to remove the word off and put not exceeding in its place.
For every day. No, but it's there for every day already.
That's it? Any other?
Mr. Chairman, I again ask that the House resumes and the Chairman reports progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House resumes and the Chairman reports progress on the bill. Honorable members, this House is now resumed. Honorable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Well, we have to go back to it.
You have to report.
I have to report it back. I have to report it back. Because we went in committee, so we're now coming back.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the chairman report progress on the bill.
All right, let me first tell the House that we were in committee and we have resumed. I have to report that the bill was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed with one amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable member for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I now move that the third reading of the bill be had.
Honorable members, the question proposes that the bill be read a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read a third time and passed. Those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled the Grenada Tourism Authority Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Southwest and Minister for Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce for first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled the Priddy-Alasny Amendment Act 2020.
An act to amend the Priddy-Alasny Act Cap 250, shortly entitled the Priddy-Alasny Amendment Bill 2020.
Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Northwest. Oh, my apologies. Honorable Representative for Carrick-on-Petite Martinique.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for leave to introduce for the first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled the Supreme Court Fees Bill 2020.
So,
An act to make provision for the methods of payment of court fees and percentages and for the repeal of the Supreme Court Fees Act Cap 315, shortly entitled Supreme Court Fees Bill 2020.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the adjournment of this House sine die.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that this Honorable House stands adjourned. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the adjournment and Section 17 of the order paper, I stand to move the motion that is in my name, and it reads thus: whereas Section 29(1) of the Grenada Constitutions make accommodation for representation through constituency election for members of Parliament, whereas members of Parliament may not be part of the executive branch of government, whereas in the performance of his or her duties as a parliamentary representative, each member of the House of Representatives is entitled to an office within his or her constituency, and to organize the activity of that office as he or she sees fit in accordance with approved parliamentary policy. Whereas the office of the House of Parliament is responsible for providing guidance on the procedures and policies of the operation of the constituency office in keeping with democratic standard. And whereas the Clerk of Parliament, as the accounting officer for the Parliament, is responsible for ensuring financial accountability for funds expended for the operations of all constituency offices in accordance with democratic standard. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Houses of Parliament hereby authorize the immediate restoration of the financial administration and oversight of the constituency offices to the Houses of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today as what was said to me a few years ago, that from where you sit...
Honorable Tobias.
Yes, sir.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, having read the motion, I must now present the motion. Honorable members, the question is of a motion in the name of the Leader of the Opposition and whereas Section 29(1) of the Grenada Constitution makes accommodation for the representation through the constituency elections of members of Parliament, and whereas members of Parliament may not be part of the executive branch of government, and whereas in the performance of his or her duty as a parliamentary representative, each member of the House of Representatives is entitled to an office within his or her constituency and or organize the activities of that office as she sees fit in accordance with the approved parliamentary policy. And whereas the office of the House of Parliament is responsible for providing guidance on the procedure and policies for the operation of the constituency office in keeping with the democratic standards, and whereas the Clerk of the House of Parliament as the accounting officer for Parliament is responsible for ensuring financial accountability for funds expended for the operation of all constituency office in accordance with the democratic standards, be it now therefore be resolved that the House of Representatives hereby authorize the immediate restoration of the financial administration and oversight of the constituency office to the Houses of Parliament. I would now, the motion has been proposed. We would have this motion as proposed by the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on second thought...
Leader of Government Business, just a while, please.
Mr. Speaker, the motion needs a seconder. You're ruling on that, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, the motion needs to be seconded. Leader of Government, Leader of the Opposition.
Is it going to be seconded after or now, the motion?
You can go and present and then we second afterwards.
Yeah.
Or it should be seconded before,
Speaker,
before the debate on it. We'll have to second the motion before the debate. Leader of Government Business? Yes. Yeah. It must be seconded before debate on the motion. Honorable members, a motion has been moved by the representative for St. George Northeast.
Mr. Speaker,
and Leader of the Opposition.
Point out which part of the standing orders that...
If you look at Leader of Government Business,
Second of motion, which reads, in the House, the question upon a motion or amendment shall not be proposed by the Speaker unless such motion or amendment has been seconded, provided that government business requires no seconding.
what is the number of this?
Page 24,
Page 24,
31, seconding of motion.
31, seconding of motion. Do we have a seconder to the motion? Honorable Representative for St. John?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Or the motion has been moved and seconded. Honorable Leader of the Opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member of St. John's for that seconding that motion. I did not indicate to him whether or not I wanted it second. Mr. Speaker, as I look today and I change the trajectory in which I am heading as to introduce this motion, I may take a page from the member for St. George Northwest. And just before he left here, he said leadership is to stand up for what is right. And if you stand up for what is right, it will pass the test of time and it will stick. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken to this situation before. In terms of our constituency offices, and in terms of the Houses of Parliament, and in terms of our democratic principles. You know, I sat here today and I remember, Mr. Speaker, yesterday after, it was 25 years ago that I first came into this house. And I look at the books and I saw myself and Brother Bowen sign as senators in July 28 of 1995. And Mr. Speaker, I remember well that as a very young man, my first time into York House, I was brought into chambers by old respectable men. They are since long gone. Dr. John Watts as President of the Senate and Sir Curtis Strawn. And Sir Curtis Strawn sat me down and he gave me a little green book that he himself authored. And he said to me, young Clement, the principles of the Houses of Representatives, the Senate and the House, must not be violated at any time by anybody. I was reminded again, Mr. Speaker, not too long ago that it is said that in the parliamentary democracy process, it is the parliament that wields the executive and not the executive that should wield parliament. And the process of standing up for democracy begins with us in this honorable place. And as one spoke to me, and as I hear the Prime Minister just said that one should stand up for what is right, and one should stand up on principle, I am reminded again that my neighbor expounded that to me. And I would say today, Mr. Speaker, God bless her soul. I have had the opportunity to sit with a lot of people. Maybe this is why probably you might find that I never studied politics, but politics is in the blood. H.A. Blaze, Winston Fleury, Sir John Watts, Sir Curtis Strawn, Dr. Mitchell, Sir Danny Williams. And Mr. Speaker, you know, for the last 9 years, I have had the company of a neighbor, Laurette Clarkson. She was my neighbor in Monjaloo. And she said, Mr. Clement, in your position, all that I should ask you to do, stand on principle and stand for what is right. Ms. Clarkson, as you guys would know, was a juggernaut here in Grenada in terms of union business and in terms of the nursing fraternity. And today, I know that you guys have expressed your sympathies and your condolences to the family. And she was a stalwart in terms of forwarding principle, the stand on principle. But Mr. Speaker, let's go back to where we are. I have searched the globe where we have burdened democracy and where democracy is at play. I look on the website of different countries, Trinidad, Barbados, St. Vincent. I look throughout the Commonwealth to find a construct like we have here in Grenada, and nowhere else could I find a construct. Mr. Speaker, what is at stake here? And I do not believe it will stick, because it is not right. For all this time that I served in Parliament, the constituency offices were administered, and rightly so, under Parliament. Through you, Mr. Speaker, the Clerk of Parliament gives directive as to the behavior of the constituency offices. Can I say that it is so now? No, it is not so. And it is troubling to me, because a couple of years ago, we felt that the Parliament was not properly staffed to provide the necessary service to the constituency offices. So it was taken from the Parliament and brought under the Prime Minister's ministry and given to a private entity. It was said that we will do a review, a 1-year review, a 2-year review. I can ask the question, Mr. Speaker, was any review done as towards the services? Moreover, Mr. Speaker, I spoke to how we behave in the constituency offices in terms of the staffing of the constituency offices. Now, Mr. Speaker, if we are engaged in governance of country and good democracy practices, we talk about the separation of powers, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. Can the executive branch of government determine to the judiciary in terms of staffing and hiring? Maybe the only institution that could do that is the PSC, Public Service Commission. Can the executive branch of government determine to the Parliament as to the staffing in the Parliament? Or should the executive branch of government now determine to the constituency offices, as it is done now, the staffing at the constituency offices? And this is the question and the motion that is before us. Mr. Speaker, moreover, I do not want us to go down a slippery slope of eroding our democracy, because it must just start one place. You know, Mr. Speaker, on the 14th of April, I moved to the Governor General and asked for the instrument. And I got the instrument. And when I did, I know you guys wish me well. I came in here into the Parliament of our country because I know that there is a position, there is an office for the Secretary of the Clerk of Parliament, because I was told that when the building was constructed, these facilities were placed there. I asked that the gentleman show me the office, and he said he could not, because he doesn't have the keys. The keys for the Parliament building is controlled by a worker from the Ministry of Works. So I cannot get into any of the offices. You know, up to this point, today, Mr. Speaker, I do not have a key if I want to come into the Parliament building. I have to check the security to let me in. Mr. Speaker, there is a reason why I asked the question that I be shown the floor plan of the office space provided, because I was called that there is such an office here, but it was not given to me as leader of Her Majesty's opposition. I wonder who has that office today. Mr. Speaker, moreover, I asked, well, you know, when things like that happen, you begin to wonder. I asked about the security personnel here at the Parliament building. Do they have access? Yes. You know, something happened. I went into one of the offices and I smelled smoke. And I said, why is this office smell like smoke? And they said they have the suspicion that maybe at night people open the office and sit and smoke in the office. I says, okay. I was shown an office by you, Mr. Speaker. I hired the secretary, Ms. Joseph, well-qualified young lady. As a matter of fact, this is not the first time she worked in the leader of the opposition's office. She was sent to me a few years ago by the then leader of the opposition, Dr. Mitchell. What he gave me, I keep. She's still here. Mr. Speaker, she was in the office. They came to clean. She left for a while, and when she went back into the office, the young lady almost went wild. Because she just came from the bank, took out $700 to go pay her bills, and when she came back, the money was gone. But Friday afternoon, she went back to the bank closed, so she waited until Monday morning to present to the clerk that her money is missing. Not knowing that probably the investigation have already started, because this was not the only incident. You might have heard about this incident, but there were other incidents. The suspect were the people who cleaned the office. And I must say thanks to the Royal Grenada Police Force, who moved quickly and swiftly, that the culprits were caught, they were investigated, and they confessed. And the monies were paid back. But then I asked the clerk, where did you get these people to work in the parliament of our country as cleaners? Lo and behold, the clerk said he is not responsible. He did not hire them. How did they get hired to work within the parliament building without even being vetted? They were working in the parliament here and not being vetted. And maybe a couple of them have already had criminal records. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I went to ask about the security. Mr. Speaker, you as the principal officer of this house, were you or the clerk responsible for the security that is present here now? I asked the question again, do they have access? Yes, they have unfettered access to the offices. Who vet these people in this honorable house? You know, Mr. Speaker, I went to Antigua, I went to Canada, I went to Trinidad, I went everywhere. And outside of the Parliament building providing security is the Royal Police Force stand up, most predominant, not by private security firms. And this is what we have here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let us not go down the road that start the eroding of our democracy. It was Winston Churchill who wrote that he said that our democracy is not perfect, but is the best form of government we have now. And anytime we start that slippery slope, we're going into something else. I would not want to say we're going into a creeping dictatorship, but if that word was used, I was never the first one to use it. We have to take a hold and bring back our democracy where it's supposed to be. Mr. Speaker, you see, I stand here today as the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, and I would stand up for democracy anywhere and everywhere it is necessary. And today, the debate that we are having in this House, where the COVID bill has been withdrawn, the standing order says that the standing order says that in order for the Parliament to happen, bills and motions, 7 days notice must be given in advance. Myself sitting here for the last 2 years, and Brother Boson here from St. Patrick's West can tell you that there were times when the bills were sent the night before, and we have to look at it the night, or not even look at it at all, and sit the next day. But today, Mr. Speaker, if respect must be given to the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, bills, motions, whatever it is, must be sent on time. And at least the 7 days notice must be given. If you look, Mr. Speaker, in terms of our democracy, where we are, and I make mention of that and I will mention it again, from time to time for the last 7 years, you would get the bills, the motions the night before. Case in point, the last budget presentation on the 20th of November. The document, 464 pages, was sent the night before. And I stayed up and I perused. And I have to make a contribution the next day. And how could you? The bills for now, for this sitting of Parliament, was sent again. This time, the time was given. So, Mr. Speaker, I got it the Friday, and I stayed up the Friday midnight, Friday, 2 o'clock, Friday, 2:30. Just as the little storm was beginning to start, I was up reading and perusing the bills so that we can bring effective debates to this House. Mr. Speaker, our democracy and the life of our democracy requires for us to do the right thing, because that is what will stand the test of time. Mr. Speaker, to do the right thing in this Parliament is a moral issue. To do the right thing in this Parliament is a spiritual issue. Mr. Speaker, you would remember the first time I stood here in front of you, 2013, in this House. I went on to say, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law, and in his law does he meditate day and night." Mr. Speaker, that was not idle said, you know. Because if I go there and you look at the plaque that is on the wall of this building, and you would see that the plaque says that together we aspire, together we achieve, as one nation under God here. It's on the coat of arms, written outside there. Mr. Speaker, as I am directed by the Constitution and by the standing orders, Sir Cotstrand tells me that these are the principal books that I have to hold in this Parliament, and I will hold them dear. And as leader of the opposition, I am not subjected to any other officers besides the Speaker of the House while he is in this chamber. So when other men of any other house want to direct me as to what I should do in this chamber or outside of the chamber, I can tell them, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly." Who wants to walk in the counsel of the ungodly? That is their business. But I will stand, and I will stand firm for what I believe. Mr. Speaker, moreover, We look at the constituency offices, and I wonder about that because I've been around a long time. I did not just came by NNP like 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. I came by NNP 30 years ago. And I know what NNP stood for then, not for now, Mr. Speaker. And I saw the clashes through the times. I was there, well, Brother Bowen could testify with Grace Duncan and Archibald and Sir John Watts, and you know, we had our differences and tie up over the time. And maybe we can tie up some more. Mr. Speaker, and I look at the constituency offices, and I must say that let us be real and let us be fair and let's give justice where justice is served. I read an excerpt last year and nobody took me on. And I said, Mr. Speaker, in a motion like that, can we use the constituency offices as sub-offices of the NNP? Should we? Who pays the workers, the staff at the constituency office? Isn't it taxpayers' monies? I do believe the answer is yes, Mr. Speaker, that taxpayers are the one who fund the payment. And then you ask me, well, what am I talking about? How is it that NNP Secretariat can be using the constituency office as sub-offices that is paid for by Grenadian taxpayers' money? Well, here is it, Mr. Speaker, if you do allow me. This is a letter from the NNP Secretariat. I read it before, so it can be read again. Dear man, to all office managers, and to me this is outrageous, just so outrageous. Dear office managers, in an effort to create a database entry organization team for the party through the constituency, we are asking each constituency to provide the names and contact and information of 2 people that fit the following guidelines. I don't have to go on anymore. The first line speaks for itself. Mr. Speaker, let us get away from using taxpayers' monies to do our party's political work in the different constituencies. Let us get away from having the constituency offices under private entity and private funds. I ask any of my colleagues sitting here today, do you know what kind of disbursement is given? I would like to know. What is the size of the contract that is given and how it is disbursed? Isn't it, Mr. Speaker, if we have to have a fair game, isn't all constituency offices equal? Shouldn't the money spent on every office the same? Is it that way now? Mr. Speaker, probably there is something going on here. Maybe I burn up the AC. I'm getting awfully hot, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, something is happening with the...
Something is happening, but that's okay. We're accustomed with the heat, so I will deal with the heat, but the AC is off. Mr. Speaker, and these are important points to be raised, and these points cannot be contested because it's there. Mr. Speaker, I ask you, I ask any member here to search the globe, search Commonwealth, search the OECS, search the Caribbean, where democracy is practiced, and tell me if you ever see this construct here with the constituency office in any other jurisdiction. It would not happen. It will not happen. You know, I did a workshop in terms of parliamentary democracy with the clerk of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, she was almost aghast as to notice how did this ever occur in Grenada. After all, what is it that we are succumbing to? Really? Really? In this day and age where anybody now could go on any website and read the standing orders and the laws that govern all constituency offices in any or the other jurisdiction, and we stood for that. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I truly believe, the power of the MP starts in the constituency and the constituency offices. And when that is taken away from you, then everything else is taken away from you. Mr. Speaker, is that the time?
Oh, extra has been given
time.
already.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Extra has been given already.
Extra has been given already. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, therefore, I would make an urgent plea for this motion, where it says here, as I wrap up, now therefore be it resolved that the House of Representatives hereby authorize the immediate restoration of the financial administration and oversight of the constituency office of the Houses of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine that the constituency offices of the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition is run by a private entity? Only in Grenada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Do we have any contribution? Would the seconder to the motion like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, Mr.
Honorable Representative for St. John.
Yeah, I'm not too au fait with the details of the member of St. George's Northeast. I know, however, with the constituency offices, it was I think it was the former clerk of Parliament that wanted it moved out from Parliament because they were having difficulty with its management, that's as far as I know. But I am not too familiar with the other points raised. I second it because I don't want, it would be embarrassing to have the opposition leader not have anybody to second his motion. So, and I entertain the debate because I think this is what this House is about. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. John. Honorable Representative for St. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I think my memory serves me similarly to what the member for St. John said about the burden that was placed on this honorable House and the clerk and the staff of this House, and so they requested that it be moved. But I just want to say in defense of the constituency office at St. Mark, that office is not an NNP office. As a matter of fact, when the government, and by implication our party, advised us that we should not even use constituency office, because constituency conveys a sort of political boundary, and that we use parliamentary office. I was happy to do that. As a matter of fact, sometimes people even say that NNP people would say that NDC people getting more than NNP, and so sometimes I get knocked out because of that on services that the office offers. Our office offers government services. They assist whenever there's need to assist. They seat people to go around and take money to them. We provide information, scholarships, or any opportunities, and we make it public. We even had a blackboard, and recently I noticed they're not so enthusiastic about putting it out. Well, we blame COVID for everything, and I said we put these opportunities out there, and I think everybody knows assistance for school, for anything that people, vulnerable people need, that the Ministry of Social Development may not be able to reach everybody. This is what we do, and we serve without fear or favor, affection, or ill will, Mr. Speaker. And I do not want what is said here to convey the idea that our offices are political offices, because while I cannot vouch for everybody, I know that generally our talk is that this, and our mandate or directive is that it must be impartial, that it must serve the public, and this is our guidance, and this is what we strive to do. And from time to time you will hear every member saying that. So I have no problem with the member having an office. I think he was elected and he has a right. But if the member imputes improper motive on us in that in our constituencies, our parliamentary office, I think it is very sad for us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for St. Mark. Honorable Representative for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just make a few brief remarks on the motion as presented by the member for St. George Northeast and leader of Her Majesty's opposition. Mr. Speaker, first I want to associate myself with the sentiments as expressed in terms of the use of the constituency office. I cannot see that it is being used as a political office, and therefore I will not say anything more. However, Mr. Speaker, I must say that I'm a bit concerned when the leader of the opposition, as the leader of the opposition, he does not have an office, so he cannot access his office. I think this is unfortunate, and I must say that, because his position is statutory. It is almost mandatory that he should have an office, and if there are any obstacles in the way of the leader of the opposition having his office, I believe that those obstacles should be removed. And I'm not talking in terms of Tobias Clement as member for St. George Northeast. I'm talking about the leader of opposition, regardless of whom. It could be him today, it could be somebody else tomorrow. So I'm saying that whatever blockages there might be, let us see how we could remove those blockages. Let us see how we could give some dignity to the leader of the opposition and let him have an office. That's what I like to say.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary St. Patrick West. Honorable Representative for St. Andrew Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to share similar sentiments to my colleague from St. Patrick West in terms of we ensuring that as Her Majesty's opposition that the office be fulfilled and that there should be an office for the leader of the opposition. And any stumbling block in the way should be removed, because we do not want to stop democracy and create any problems as it relates to the leader of the opposition. However, I want to address the issue of citing the constituency office as it is in its present state as a party office. Mr. Speaker, in fact, from the interviews to get office managers, this is done by a public servant, not by us as representative, and I know a lot of representatives have issues with that. So it's not only the leader of the opposition. We believe that maybe we should be able to choose. But the very fact that it is being done by a public servant speaks to the kind of person and the qualification and what they're looking for somebody who can manage the office. And all the other office staff, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I disagree that it is used as, from where I speak, St. Andrews Northwest, my constituency office can be accessed or is accessed by everyone despite of political affiliation. People are free to come in, and they are coming in to such services from me as their representative despite of any political affiliation. So I do not want it or want the public to believe that this is an NNP office. In fact, I believe that before, people were saying that. However, with the whole change in dynamics and where the public servants are also involved, we are getting better services as it relates to housing. The state officers, they are also accessing the office. We have youth personnel who working along with young people within our constituency. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, but I am also very happy, Mr. Speaker, that this issue is now present on the table, Because you know, sometimes even after we speak over and over as it relates to constituency payment to us as representative, you're still hearing that as ministers or as parliamentary representative, we are receiving $10,000 a month. Excuse. So I'm happy that the opposition leader can raise here to say that we as representatives do not collect one black cent, but every cent to pay the workers is done by a private provider, and that speaks volume, and that should be recorded, and that should be known to the entire public of Grenada, Carriacou, and PD Martinique, because you always read, where is the $10,000 that you get per month? In fact, in my constituency, somebody add up a whole year and say almost $500,000 I receive for the year, and they want to know what I'm doing with it. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that we are here discussing that so that people would know the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Representative. Okay. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, well, I cannot say that I'm surprised at the motion. And having been apprised of certain incidents that happened on this compound, Mr. Speaker, while I think all of us hold the same sentiments that, of course, the leader of the opposition should be provided with his official office. And while I do not want to go into the details, I think the leader of the opposition should do so himself. The speakers before me have indicated the reason for moving from the parliament into an office, and why perhaps it was not totally done by the executive office, but was given to a provider through a bidding process, Mr. Speaker. That's all that provider won. The bid for providing the services, Mr. Speaker. And I could remember, and the leader of the opposition could say so himself, when parliamentary representative offices were being disconnected, the phones were disconnected, the landlord was moving people out, and then we ask, what is the reason, what can be done? Nearly all the representatives came together and said, no, we cannot continue as is. And that is what pushed us away from the parliament. The clerk made it abundantly clear that he and his staff were not equipped to do this work. And they had many other things to do that demanded their time. And this was a lot more that they never contemplated before. Was never part of the remit. And so we agreed mutually to move into this new construct, Mr. Speaker. The member for St. George Northeast and leader of the opposition could tell us if he was having the same problems. Because we know, the records are there. And why, at the point in time, he agreed. If he says, well, I agreed then, and this is an opportune time to move back. But, Mr. Speaker, even before the resolution came, and after the resolution came, I had in mind, and I discussed with other members of the executive, speaking with the clerk, Mr. Speaker, and with you, whether or not the situation is now that he can accommodate and take on the responsibility of doing what the private provider is doing. Mr. Speaker, the private provider will go to the offices, they'll bring toiletries. Now in the COVID time, they'll bring all the sanitizing system, they'll bring soap, they'll come in, they'll meet the landlord, they try to negotiate rent down. and all of these things. Because every time that bill comes in, everybody wants to keep it down. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I'll be carrying out that task between yourself and the clerk to see whether the office here has the resources to do it, Mr. Speaker. And what we must remember is that as parliamentary representatives, it will not be silos where I will choose this person and say, no. It will be under the purview of the clerk and your department, Mr. Speaker. So if you said that they must be interviewed, then they will be interviewed, and I expect no less, Mr. Speaker, from your department. I remember, but it was under this house, that you advocated a lot of training. In fact, you yourself trained some of the senior persons, Mr. Speaker, and we were very happy with that. So if we anticipate, even if I converse with you and the clerk, Mr. Speaker, and the rest of this honorable place indicate that we will move back there because it was here, and we moved for a reason. So even if we can come back here, all of us must realize, even if we dislike the PMO's office saying that we will interview every person there, they must be of good standard, of good quality. We could recommend as many as they want, but they must go and pass the test. Many of us recommended 2 and 3, and sometimes they give us kudos, oh, that was a good person. In other cases, they send back all 3 and say, get another 3. This, I expect, Mr. Speaker, to continue. Because my colleague member and leader of the opposition, one of his main concerns was the public servants say no to somebody, and introducing somebody behind or outside of the interview, and the public servants pulling the string and say, no pay. I expect no less, Mr. Speaker, from this honorable house. So that is why, after discussing with you and your staff, Mr. Speaker, intention is to go back to all of us, including the leader of the opposition, who is also a parliamentary representative, to say this is what would be expected by this honorable place. And so we do not get the concept that all of us will be introducing whomsoever we wish and whatsoever we wish within our constituency office, Mr. Speaker. And to talk about sums and things, it's audited, Mr. Speaker. And the Ministry of Finance looks at what is given. That is why when we're cutting, we're trying to cut everywhere. And that is why the provider is trying to put, rules in place, or you use electricity and so forth. Mr. Speaker, with respect to using the offices as a party office, this is a sentiment that prevailed maybe way back from 2010. Remember, we started in a place where we had no parliamentary offices. We started where the party paid for its office. And as we move into parliamentary offices, then people maybe continue to be on the see the representative to figure it's a party office. But we have told, Mr. Speaker, I have done so, and I know other representatives have done so, we have told the people in the office, that is why it is so good for them to go through the interview with the public servants. They recognize it is taxpayers' money. And I've told them with the constituents that no one could stop you from coming here. It is taxpayers' money, and you have a right. And I've told the workers, and others have done so, that you cannot stop anybody. It is their money that's paying you, and you must perform your service. And if the PMO officers, based on complaint, and it has happened already, they call you in for an interview, the witnesses will come, that may be a constituent, then you're gone. You're not performing well. And I think if anything happens, Mr. Speaker, even if we change, this situation should prevail. Oh, Mr. Speaker, you see, the reason for certain action was because some of us wanted to put exactly who we wanted to do certain things. So we must know
that whosoever we are, this will not prevail, Mr. Speaker. And I could make the recommendation, after speaking with you and your staff, you have the capacity, you're ready to do it, you'll not be bugged, you'll not slow up your work, and I could make the recommendation to the other members, and then we could move, Mr. Speaker, to the restoration, provided that it will be no less strict, no less efficient as what is happening now with a provider. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, on restoration, they may take a provider, may not be the same one, but you'll recognize, Mr. Speaker, that outsourcing is the most efficient way in this case when you look at staff. And we have a good idea from the budgetary presentation, a discourse of the staff in this place and what they are facing. And I believe that, Mr. Speaker, the staff will come up with the same thing like that. We may manage a provider, but we do not have the wherewithal. That's how it started here. If such is the case, Mr. Speaker, then we'll continue on this discourse. I can't tell the other members what to say, but in my view, Mr. Speaker, I don't know that a decision should be made before consulting. And the leader of the opposition knew why we left. So I think consultation should have gone on either through himself and his office with you, and then with the rest of us to say, well, I think that the staff is ready, Mr. Speaker. I look too at the motion, Mr. Speaker, and there are certain inaccuracies, in the motion that I won't want to dwell too much on. But I think we can come back here, we can do the groundwork, and perhaps we'll make a decision and prepare, because you cannot say move here without the preparation. We might say within 1 year, without at the end of a certain contract, we may propose that it goes that way, Mr. Speaker. But in the ministry, Mr. Speaker, to tell you what the feeling is, but this has been dispensed with a lot of the way. If you ask the public services to get something done, then they tell you, no, they couldn't find out. And I say, did you call the constituency office? And you'll see a shock. Don't you know it's taxpayers who are paying them? And they are to provide this service for the people there. So if you want information, you could ask for it. Because what we do in ministries is to and just as a private provider, the office will help us to serve these people. One, we are the ministry, we don't know people in the constituency. There was one time we were looking for a contractor, Mr. Speaker. Months. So they came to me, help me get a contractor. I say, did you call the constituency office? No. I say, call the constituency office, tell them you're a government arm, which ministry you're from, and you want to find this person. I said, they'll find anybody you wish to know. So Speaker, the next day, and the man was supposed to come to sign a contract, which he won. The next day, the man was in the office. Why? He's a contractor. When he's on the roof, he doesn't use his phone, safety. He gets home, Mr. Speaker, after 10 or so in the night. Nobody's out there calling him. It's after 4, 5, even though he's staying in the office 6 or 7, you would not get him. One call to the constituency office. The office knows him. They were at his door, 11:30 in the night. Because if you call the phone, he's not there. To tell him that he has this contract to do work in the constituency, to help the constituents, Mr. Speaker. And he, knowing that, not through his fault, that he had prevented the constituency from getting service, within 3 days, Mr. Speaker, he was on the task. And since then, Mr. Speaker, I see the attitude changing in many ministries. They're calling the constituencies when we tell them and remind them that they're being paid by taxpayers. And that relationship is getting more. You want to know a piece of road, you call the office and you say, I want to get it. The ministry goes out and find the road. You want to ask somebody in social services, was that social services, you call the office, immediately they will bring the social worker into the place, into the roads and into the homes, Mr. Speaker. And so I totally disagree that offices are used and looked at as constituency offices, Mr. Speaker. At one time, the same member, then he was not an opposition leader yet, raised the issue of using constituency offices for meetings. And many of us were in shock for party meetings. Many of us were in shock. And because we were not doing that. But since then, Mr. Speaker, once he raised it about 2 or 3 years ago, if any one of us, a few of us who were doing it, I could say that had been dispensed with. If one of us were failing to follow the rules. So I want to remind my colleague member and leader of the opposition that interacting with each other, we could get things done. Because I'm apprised of what took place here. And I told the person who reported to me, that cannot be possible. No one will go in and start a work and bring builders into a government building without going through the ministry. Even if you're paying them yourselves, then altering a government, Mr. Speaker, property or premises, no, yet. It belongs, it is ruled by the parliament, but everything at the work. The question that was asked to me is seeing this was constructed under the Ministry of Works. This is what was reported to me. And when I inquired of the staff in this ministry, they indicated that they knew nothing about it, and they just saw work about to take place. So I found that very strange, because I thought a member, even unofficially, may get to me and say, listen, I want an office for my secretary. That did not happen. So I still don't know. I've not heard from the members yet, Mr. Speaker, of exactly what happened in the area. But reported to me, I think, by people of integrity, that workers simply appeared, and it sounds strange. So all of us will want the member to have good facilities. Approaching the ministry or approaching the presiding officer, I think would have done the work. But it appears to me now that since then, the conversation broke down.